Hi, I'm Karen Spurtzel with the Maryland Sheep and Wool 2021 Virtual Festival. We're talking with David Green, who's written a comprehensive history of Maryland wool pool. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Can you tell us what the wool pool, that's really hard to say, wool pool is?
Well, the Wool Pool is a cooperative marketing effort that was promoted and sponsored by the Maryland Sheepers Association. And as the book says, it had a 60-year run from 1956 till 2016.
So who would participate in it? Was it a voluntary or was it everybody in the state?
Well, it was for everybody as far as producers are concerned. It was set up for producers to market their wool because there really wasn't any other place that they could sell wool. When it was started in 1956, the wool pool was the only game in town. Now there was other wool pools in other states, but as far as, not having to travel very far and love, somewhere is up to maybe 2,000 or 3,000 pounds of wool, it was all very consolidated in the state of Maryland, and it was in central Maryland.
So why was it important to Maryland agriculture?
Well, it was important in Maryland agriculture because it helped market a product that was produced on Maryland farms. And as I mentioned in the book, the actual Maryland Farm Bureau, which is the agency which supports and promotes Maryland agriculture, actually at one time helped market the wool. And then they stopped doing that. They had other priorities. And that's about the time that there wasn't any way to market wool in Maryland. And so that's when the Maryland sheep breeders got involved in doing it themselves.
So what was this wool when it was sold? What was it used for? Was it spun into yarn? Was it any of the other
Well,
uses of wool?
the wool was sold as raw wool. In other words, just like it comes off the sheep. And in that case, depending on the grade, the wool can go into various categories. In every case, the wool is sold to a processor, and it's goes to a scouring mill, and then it starts the process of, that's the first process, cleaning it, getting all the dirt out of it. And then it either goes in two ways. It either goes into the worsted system, or we're talking about yarns and that type of thing, or it goes into the woolen system, which is made into clothing.
So what were some of the highlights of the wool pool over the 65 years it was in existence?
60 years. Well, I guess the longevity of it, certainly at one time, there was over 125,000 pounds of wool that the pool marketed. And then at the end, it was down below 20,000. So certainly one of the highlights would be the fact that we sold a lot of wool at one time and helped a lot of producers. The other highlights is that it brought producers together, kind of like a big picnic, but to market their wool. And so everybody came over at the beginning. They came over a period of 2 days, and then when it finished, they only came one day. But they came and they saw each other. So it was somewhat of a social event, but it was also largely an educational event too.
So this wasn't a yearly event. Is that how it
No,
operated?
no. Well, sheep are only sheared once a year,
Right.
so consequently, we sell the wool once a year, and it really was positioned so that at the time the wool pool started, most people sheared their sheep in the spring, from March, April, May, and early June. So the wool pool was always at the end of June, kind of at the end of the shearing year. Today, there can be sheared all 12 months, but at that time they were, June was a good month to have the pool because most of the shearing was done. And if somebody have to shear in the fall, you can carry it over as long as you keep it clean and dry. And then you can, sell up the next June.
So how did the pool change and evolve from the 50s through the 2000s?
Well, it changed in a number of ways. It changed in locations. At the beginning, it was held in 2 locations, and once at the Maryland State Fairgrounds after the first 2 years, and then at Frederick County Fairgrounds, and then for a short period of time in the late 90s, it was held in Delaware. But it changed from the number of locations to, at the end, it was only 1 location. That was at the Maryland State Fairgrounds. It changed in other ways too. It changed by how the wool was graded. In the early years, it was actually called grading wool, where they separated it into categories called fine and medium and coarse, and tags and rejects and things like that. At the end, due to a recommendation by the American Sheep Industry Association Wool Council, they tried to improve the quality of our U.S. wools. We went to a system of classing wool, and basically classing wool as to its color, but also to its fineness and its staple length and its cleanliness. So it changed quite a bit from the early how it was separated at the early stage at the end. Now realize the pooling process is where everybody brings their wool in, and then somebody looks at it, and then they move it into different categories right there that day, and then those different types of wool are bagged separately, and then the type of wool is marked on that bag, so that when it gets to the processing plant, the processors are able to keep like wools together. They keep all the fine wools together, the medium wools, the coarse wools together. Whereas, if you didn't do that, then they'd have to do that down there. So the wool pool actually did the sorting and the grading of the various fleeces, which was fairly time consuming.
So who did that? Did you bring experts in? Where was it experts within the state, such as yourself, that did that?
It was mostly experts within the state. At the beginning, when the wool pool started, the modern pool started in '56, there were mostly faculty members of the University of Maryland who had studied wool and were competent in being able to select the wool based on fineness and length and cleanliness and all that. And then that pretty much held through up until, roughly the early 80s. And then, I was with the University of Maryland, so you can say the University of Maryland was part of it right up to the end. But the other people who were taught how to class wool by the American Sheep Industry Association became involved. And so that's where those people actually did the classing at the end, along with myself.
So have you been involved in the wool pool for most of your career?
Well, yeah. I started probably selling wool in 1956. And then when I was in college, I worked with the pool because one of the graders at the pool was Dr. Emery Leffel. And he was my college professor, and he's also my boss because I worked with the sheep at the University of Maryland, and I worked at the sheep barn. And so we had a close relationship, and so that continued. And he was one of the graders, along with other faculty members at the university, up until the late 80s and early 90s. So yeah, I've been involved with it. And then I was manager for 13 years. I was assistant manager under Jack Matthews, and I was manager, and then became involved with the classing at the end.
So was the Maryland pool set up to make money?
No, it was a program of the Maryland Sheepers Association, and so it was a service to members of the association, and so the goal was to break even, not to lose money, not to make money. So the producers would get all their as much back as possible. Now, the benefit to the Maryland Sheep Breeders Association is because Ed Shepard, who actually started the wool pool in 1956, he set it up so that the dues to the Maryland Sheep Breeders Association would be automatically deducted from your wool pool check. So that enabled the Maryland Sheep Breeders not to have to go out and try to get dues every year. It was because everybody who sold wool, had dues deducted, unless they had less than $30 worth, and then we wouldn't take it out of them. But that really helped the sheep breeders for a long time because it kept them afloat, provided a source of income, and also it increased. One time the membership of Maryland Sheep Breeders was over 400. That's probably about half that right now. I don't know.
So are there pools in other states as well? Is this a common way of selling? I'm speaking from someone who likes to look at sheep and loves to knit with their product, but that's all I know about any of this.
Well, there's various ways to selling. Well, not too many different ways, but one way is for the large producers in the West, which have maybe 10, 15,000 sheep. So a buyer comes and then he buys it right off the farm. Then there are pools out west where smaller producers are able to sell, much like we do. And then there are, of course, pools here in the east. There's pools in Pennsylvania still, and Maryland had, of course, is not anymore, but Virginia and West Virginia, the local states had pools. Now, the third way was somebody could bag up their wool and send it to a co-op in the Midwest. And so there was a place in Ohio that you could send your wool to, and then they would grade it and do all that, and then send you a check back. So you didn't have to sell your wool at the pool, but it was cheaper to do it that way because you only had to haul it a few miles. But if you actually packaged it up and sent several hundred pounds out to Ohio, it would be somewhat costly.
So what are the options for sheep breeders now in Maryland, now that the pool is no longer?
Well, they can send it to another state. Most states will allow. Now, we allowed people to come from Pennsylvania or Delaware or wherever to bring their wool in, and then that's reciprocal with those other states. You can take your wool to Virginia or Pennsylvania. There are local buyers who will buy it, and sometimes shearers that come in and shear the sheep will actually take the wool and excuse me, and then sell it for you, or just buy it right off the farm.
How have you seen the sheep industry change over the course of your career as a sheep breeder?
Well, quite a bit, actually. As at one time there were, there was over 500,000 sheep in the state of Maryland back in the 20s and 30s and stuff like that. Starting in the 1950s, after World War II, the sheep numbers started to decline, and they just have kept on declining. Although in Maryland, the sheep numbers have kind of stayed fairly constant over the last 20, 30 years at around 20, 25,000 ewes, the mother sheep. This is, I think, has a lot to do with the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival, who over the years has promoted sheep, and they've promoted the raising of sheep. They've had classes and seminars and things like that. So it can be said that the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival has actually helped maintain the level of sheep production in the state of Maryland over its lifetime.
So what's the connection then, or is there a connection between the Sheep and Wool Festival and the Maryland Sheep Pool?
Well, yeah, there was a connection early on. When I was a manager, which was about the time that the sheep and wool pool started, we had some people, spinners, that came in and wanted to buy fleeces. So my naivety allowed them to do that, and we picked some nice ones out. Well, then the next year, there was about 10 times more people coming in. Well, that completely disrupted things. And so that wouldn't work out. So with the festival, we said, hey, if these people want to buy high quality fleeces, let's encourage some of the producers who are producing very excellent fleeces to bring their fleeces to the Maryland Sheep and Wool Festival and sell them there. And so that's what we did. I was actually in charge of the first wool sale at the festival, and it went off very well. And so if it, in a way, the wool sales helped kick off the festival in that segment of it, and it's been going ever since. I mean, the wool sales at the festival are nothing less than phenomenal. And of course, in this day and age, there are people that just produce wool just for sale at the festival or directly from their farm for hand spinners.
So you said that the wool pool was over 100 years old, or the first one had started 100 years ago. How long did that one last? And what happened to it, and why was it then restarted?
Well, in the early years, it was started by the Maryland Farm Bureau, and that went on, and they worked with a group, a marketing agency out of Virginia, and in the late 40s, early 50s, things kind of went kafloogie because that marketing agency, I think, became insolvent. So Maryland Farm Bureau said, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So that left Maryland sheep producers without a way to sell their wool, which at that time in the 50s, it was several hundred, more than that. It was probably 200,000 or 300,000 pounds of wool produced in the state of Maryland, at least. And so that's when the Maryland Sheep Breeders stepped in, and Ed Schefter in particular, who was president of the Maryland Sheep Breeders at that time, saw the need, and he said, well, let's do something. So he organized the pool and made a lot of the early equipment. He went around and visited local pools, saw how they were run, and then basically set the Maryland wool pool up in like manner to those ones that were already in existence.
So was there anything unique about the Maryland pool?
I think one of the unique aspects of the pool was the fact that we were fairly innovative. And looking at nearby or neighboring pools, we adopted change over the years. We went from selling wool in big sausage bags, like they did back after the Civil War, and it continued packaging them in the same way right on up through the 80s and 90s. And so we changed the way the wool was packed and shipped to producers, because we had to get as much wool on a railroad car or a truck as possible to reduce the freight rates. The more pounds of wool you had in the vehicle, the cheaper freight rates you got. So we adopted that change, and then we adopted the change in grading, like classing, like I said earlier. And so I think the pool was actually a little more innovative and willing to change than our neighbors.
So was there any educational aspect to the pool as it went through the whole year, but specifically the weekend that you all got together and graded everything? Yeah,
it was, well, that was kind of the logic for the University of Maryland to become involved at the beginning, because when people brought their wool to the pool, they can usually expect to stay there a couple hours. And in the process of bringing your wool, you had to physically unload the wool, you put it on a table, and then one of the faculty members would examine just about every fleece. And in the process of examining the wool, the producer could say, well, why are you doing it? Why is this going here? And what type of wool do I have? And, how come you threw that one away? And in addition, they could also ask the knowledgeable people about sheep production problems they might have on a farm, nutrition, sheep care, any type of question they might have. They had the opportunity once a year to come and talk over and ask any questions they wanted to. So that was a big educational component of the wool pool. Now, in addition to that, in the early 90s, when we were making change from grading to classing and changing the packaging. So we also had classes. I instigated a class of a wool handling school. And then a couple years later, actually the first wool classing school here in the East was held on a farm in Cecil County. And then we had actually two other classing schools after that that went to the late 90s. So, there was a strong educational component to the pool. And I think it really helped educate people on how to identify various types of wool. Especially a lot of the people that came to classing schools were those buyers who would come to the festival and try to pick out which fleeces were better and make sure they didn't happen to pick a fleece that the wool had a break in it, a weak spot, something like that. And so all this type of information was taught, and I think it was valuable.
Do you think a pool like this improves the quality of the fleeces through this education process and having the breeder see how his wool is being graded?
Oh yeah, I can remember several producers who came for a long period of time, and I could see their wool improving, over the years from when they started until they stopped coming. And so yeah, there's no doubt about it that the object for the pool was to sell to the buyer the highest quality we could. And in order to kind of check on that, we actually instigated in the early 90s wool sampling, where we took core samples of the wool after it was graded, and then took those samples, which look about the size of a hot dog in size, and then we sent those samples away to a wool testing lab, and then we got those results back, and then we could see if our graders were putting the right fleeces in the right categories. And it also helped with our classing schools. When we were doing that, we could show those wool testing results to the students in the classes, and then they could see how, for example, fineness and coarseness in wool may vary at different parts of the sheet. It might be one micron in the center, and then different microns in the leg wool or on the neck or shoulder wool. So all this was part of the educational process, and the pool was involved and did it.
What gave you the idea to write this book?
Well, when the pool ended, Chris Thorne said to me, well, since you've been around longer than just about anybody else and still living, would you be interested in writing up the history of the pool? And I naively said, yeah, I could do that, figuring it would be 2 or 3 pages. And then that started in about 2016 or 2017, when the pool ended. And then, like a lot of things, my way of working is to procrastinate as long as possible, because if you wait a long time, things usually come together easier. If you rush into stuff, you never do it quite you like to do it. So I procrastinated, and then eventually there in early 2018, I got down to it. And then I had a lot of people help me. People heard about I was writing this, and then they sent me materials, and that's how I got a lot of the early history of the Maryland Sheepers Association, was through a gentleman that sent me the information that he'd located, and so it kind of evolved. But Chris is the one that got me started.
Had you ever written a book before?
No, no, I've done quite a bit of writing because my position with the university. I wrote newsletters and things of that nature on a regular basis, but no, I never. I've never written a book before, but it was interesting, and I liked it because it was challenging. It's challenging because it puts together your organizational skills and separating and trying to prioritize and put a chronology to the events that happened and everything, and then to look up things and then double check and make sure it's right. So yeah, it was challenging, but was very rewarding too.
And you have a copy of the book there?
Yeah, the book's here.
And where can people find your book?
Well, the book is on sale from the festival store, which is run by Sheepman Supply. And I think there might be some copies available other ways, but that's the main source of it right now. And this cover was kind of interesting because I designed the cover. That's our barn in the background, the green metal part of it, and that's an old time wool rack, which I just happened to keep for no other reason than to hang strings on it at the time. And so we put it out there, and I had a young fellow that was with a photography club in Baltimore, who was known by my neighboring sheep producer. And so she sent him up here, and so he did the cover, and he got credit for it in the book.
Well, very nice. Thank you so much for talking to me this evening.
Well, very enjoyable, and good luck.
Thank you.
Yeah.